a person doesn't eat well, they smoke cigarettes, they, don't exercise, but the one thing that they do have are meaningful human connections in their life in abundance, and they've actually cultivated that in their lives, and these individuals magically live to the age of 100,
Mhm.
and so it's like, how do they do that? And so, there's no doubt about it now that the research has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that when we have meaningful human connection in our lives, it does impact absolutely every component that's important to us.
Welcome to the Wealthy Life Podcast, the space where founders and leaders build the infrastructure behind their performance. I'm your host, Deanna Rose, and each week we break down the nervous system, biology, identity, and emotional patterns driving your leadership so you can expand without losing clarity, focus, momentum, or your life. Let's begin. Welcome back to another episode of the Wealthy Life podcast. I'm joined by Stuart Knight, one of the most inspirational and energetic and the kindest human I know. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I'm going to get Stuart to introduce himself.
Wow. I mean, yeah, you know what? I just need to get my partner to introduce me that way as one of the kindest human beings I've ever met in my life. So when I introduce myself, it's such an interesting thing to do because obviously there's a component of, tooting your own horn. But, when people ask me what I do, who the hell I am, what I'm all about, I tell people that the easy title I use is that I'm the founder of the Human Connection Group, but really and truly, that's just rooted in the last 30 years of being an entrepreneur who has produced everything from high school shows to theatrical musicals to corporate speeches to live events, but they're all have been dedicated to the importance of expanding ourselves consciously, spiritually, and connecting with each other on a human level. And so, in that time, I've written books on this subject, and I've done what you are doing today. I've had many podcast conversations on this subject. I write blogs on this subject, and the big thing today is that I speak, around the world. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that corporately, speaking at events, trying to teach people to level up with their human connections. So that's who I am professionally. I'm here in New York City personally with my partner and my two kids, ages 8 and 10, who are the ones that basically are my main full time job. And so that's what I'm all about. But I'm really looking forward to speaking to you today. And, my long lost friend, Deanna, and, so take me down it. Where do you wanna go? Do you wanna talk about love, life, and happiness?
All of it. But just going back really quick to the kindness part, um, I think you know when you're a kind person because you see it in your kids. I think your kids are a reflection of you, and it's so apparent and so obvious how kind they are when I met them and for the things that you tell me. So it really is they're essentially an extension of you. So yes, Marina will one day recognize and say it out loud that you are one of the kindest people, hands
That's
down.
nice of you to say. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that, in a world that is so disconnected and so divided, and people continuously lobbing all kinds of insults at each other, whether it's online or in person, a little kindness is, something that we could all use, and so I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that.
Of course, of course. It's the fact. Um, I think I think one thing that I want to really talk about today is your HIFA standard and also just I think trends over the years as well through, 2020 what happened. I feel like that was a transition point for a lot of people in terms of human connection and how people see the role of human connection in their own lives. And I feel like that was at least for me that was almost a turning point in terms of how I saw other people and my connection with my community. Wherever you want to go with this, either the HIFA standard you want to start, or we can talk about just the
Right.
timeline.
Well, I mean, let's jump in with human connection first and then get to the hyper-standard because kind of one precedes the other. And I think you just hit the nail on the head is that, when you talk to another person, most people, you don't have to convince them on the importance of, let's say, exercise. Even if they don't do it, they know it's important. You don't have to convince people on the importance of eating healthy food. Again, most people don't do it, but they know they should do it. Or another example would be good sleep or meditation or good relationships, right? We know these things are important to us in our life, but human connection is not one of those things that at a very early age we're taught is not just as important, but now the research shows may even be more important than all those things. In fact, it's interesting because you see these studies that come out where a person doesn't eat well, they smoke cigarettes,
Mm,
they, don't exercise, but the one thing that they do have are meaningful human connections in their life in abundance, and they've actually cultivated that in their lives, and these individuals magically live to the age of 100.
mhm,
And so it's like, how do they do that? And so, there's no doubt about it now that the research has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that when we have meaningful human connection in our lives, it does impact absolutely every component that's important to us. And I think so the very thing that, first thing that it would be important to talk about for your listeners and your viewers is to get them kind of thinking about the idea of whether or not they have um, a standard or whether or not they have a benchmark or they even have an idea of what human connection is.
mm,
Malcolm Gladwell, when he talked about, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell, the 10,000 steps.
mm,
And it's ubiquitous now. I mean, everybody talks about whether or not they got their 10,000 steps in, and they're quite proud of themselves if they get 20,000 in.
mhm,
And so it created this benchmark where people had something to attain. This is what I'm measuring myself against. But when it comes to human connection, what are you measuring yourself against? Like if you bump into a friend that you haven't seen for a while on the street and you chat for 10 or 15 minutes, when you walk away from that conversation, what was your human connection score? Did you get a 10 out
mm.
of 10? Did you get a 6 out of 10? And a lot of people would listening to this would think that's insane. I've never, that seems almost too
Yeah.
robotic, right? But people do have these measures for other areas in their life. How many calories did I eat today? How many hours did I sleep? Or how many steps did I take, like I said before? And so what I try to inspire people to do is to think about human connection in a measurable way. How
Mhm,
much did you get in today? How much did you get in this week? And specifically, how well are you connecting with, let's say, your coworkers, your clients, your customers? How well are you at connecting with your community? How well are you at connecting with your partner or your kids or your mom and dad, your brother and sister, whoever it may be? And once you start asking the question, you're forced to come up with the answer. And that is, in some cases, terrifying for most people because I think when they ask that question, they realize, I mean, if I had to give myself a score, it
mm,
probably isn't that great. And so when I get people thinking about what that score might be, it's not my intention to make them feel bad about themselves, but
mhm,
rather to realize that it's a score that they can change. And that when you change it, the research shows that on a professional perspective, the stronger your human relationships and your human connections are with people, all the research shows that productivity increases, collaboration increases, innovation increases, conflict decreases, absenteeism decreases, talent retention increases. All the factors by which we look at.
mhm.
In what creates a great work environment, we say these things are important to us, and yet people aren't using human connection as a mechanism to make those things flourish.
Right.
And then on the flip side, in your personal life, all the research again shows that when you have meaningful human connection, you heal from disease faster. You, in fact, get less disease. You sleep better. You have a stronger immune system. You have lower rates of depression, anxiety. Quite often, you have lower rates of dementia. You have lower blood pressure. Like they have now, the World Health Organization recently said that loneliness and a lack of human connection is now responsible for a 29% increase in heart attacks and stroke, as well as higher blood pressure, higher rates of inflammation, higher rates of dementia, diabetes, and depression. And they've now said that this loneliness, all of these factors, uh, when you accumulate them and put them together, that they believe that they're now responsible for about 100 deaths on planet Earth every single hour.
Wow.
And so this is something to wake up to, right? So we have to stop and ask ourselves, number one, what the hell is human connection? Or number one, let's even go further back. What is loneliness? Okay.
Mm.
And so loneliness, when someone thinks about loneliness, the first thing they think of is they picture somebody sitting in their house or their apartment by themselves with no one to talk to. And I often joke about this. I said, if you've got young kids like myself, that's not loneliness, but that's rather a dream come true. I would take that any day of the week. If that's loneliness, give it to me. But so loneliness is not what happens when we don't have someone to speak to. Loneliness is what happens when we don't feel connected to the people we are speaking to.
Right.
And so research has now shown that you can break that up into one of three categories. The first category is the loneliness you feel when you don't feel connected to your closest confidant. Okay. So now for most people, that's a husband or a wife or a partner. So you're with this person quite often, but you don't feel truly connected to them. Um, I often joke around about this as well, where I'll see like an older couple who look like they've been married for 50 years sitting in a restaurant together, and they haven't been speaking to each other during their meal. Like they're literally one person's looking one way, the other person's looking the other way. It's like you look at them and you guys think you've run out of questions. Like you think you've covered every topic. Like there's nothing else to talk about. And I always joke, I say, I just want to walk up to their table and go, hey, listen, if you two were invisible for one day, where would you go and why?
Mm.
You're welcome. And then just walk away. And then they'll start talking about stuff that they don't normally speak about and they'll connect about things they don't normally connect on.
Right.
So that's the first category. The second category is the lack of connection we feel with our friends. We have friends, we make plans with those friends, we go out with those friends, but we don't really connect when we get together. People are, and we all know this disease of staring at your phone while you're with your friend, and the person's like kind of half with you, half with the phone. The topics that people speak about when they're out with their friends quite often are not the kinds of topics that make people feel connected. So you walk away from that dinner out with your buddies or your gals, and you don't feel connected. The third category is the category of lack of human connection with our community.
Mm.
And so these are, the people you bump into in the elevator, the kid you see at school drop off, the local barista, whoever it might be. We talk to these people all the time, but we're always like repeating the same conversations.
Yeah.
And so we don't feel connected to those people. So research shows that if you feel a lack of connection in any one of these three categories, which I think is safe to say we all feel at some point, we're going to be experiencing the classic feelings of loneliness. And so, again, to that point, this is the reason why we're now seeing studies that are coming out and showing that 50% of North Americans say they feel lonely at least once a week.
Right.
41% and 29%, 41% of men, 29% of women say they feel lonely at work every day. 65% of college students in America say that they feel lonely and socially isolated at school. And
Mm.
58% of adults say that they don't think that there's one person in their life that knows them really well. And so you look at
58%.
this,
Sorry.
58, yeah,
Wow. Sorry.
50, no, don't be sorry. Yeah, 58. Like I was just as shocked as you were when I heard that. I was like, so this is like more than one in two people think that no one really knows them well. They
Yeah.
know them. And so we have to look at this and we have to ask ourselves, okay, well then why is that happening? And we can point to all the obvious stuff. We can talk about social media and we should, and we can talk about digital devices.
Mhm.
But what I believe has been happening is that we live in a world where when we speak to people, what we do is we ask questions that give them the opportunity to think something.
Right.
But what real human connection is when you ask questions that give people an opportunity to feel something. And what people really want to feel is they want to feel the things that we all wanna feel. They wanna feel curiosity and awe and wonder and silliness and love and intrigue, and they also on the flip side, they also wanna feel sadness. They wanna have those emotions of sadness and frustration
Mhm.
and fear, and they don't just wanna feel these things by themselves, they wanna feel them with other people.
Right.
And if you go each day, each week, each month, and you just rarely, if ever, feel those things with other people, you will eventually find yourself in a situation where you're never feeling that kind of connection, and thus you feel lonely. So, what does it cause a person to do? It causes them to look for those feelings elsewhere.
Mm.
And this is the reason why we see people scrolling on their phones everywhere they go. People can't even walk down the street anymore without looking for a feeling. You know, and then they get it. You get it. Like something makes you laugh, you feel something. Something maybe even makes you well up and you cry a little bit and you feel something. But of course, that feeling doesn't last for long. And so, if we are never getting these kinds of feelings, we are essentially, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically deprived.
Mhm.
And so it's when we connect with another human being where we share laughter, or if we connect on a story that is similar that we both share, or a near death experience we both went through at different times of our life, or just the fact that some of our favorite people, we find out that they both grew up in the same small town. Like what we're doing is we're sharing feelings with these people,
Mm.
and that's filling up our tank. And when we fill up our tank, we are then the ones who are responsible for creating a space by which we are living our fullest and most authentic lives.
Right.
And so we sadly now we live in a world where the first biggest problem is that we're not even carving out the time to
Yeah.
to do it. Anthropologists studying hunter gatherers said that hunter-gatherers spent their days were broken up in thirds. So one-third of their day was spent working, one-third of their day was spent socializing, and one-third of their day was spent sleeping. And so you think about that, and you think about how 8 hours of a person's day used to be spent socializing,
Yeah.
connecting. Today, the average amount of time that we spend socializing with people in the Western world is 35 minutes.
Right.
And so even during that 35 minutes, it's not even that meaningful. What ends up happening is, you have a bunch of small interactions with a bunch of different people that
Mm.
accumulates to that 35 minutes. Most of those conversations were repeated, and most of those conversations were about, things like the weather,
Yeah.
and like, did you hear the sun came out again today?
Yeah. Yeah.
Apparently, it's been doing it for 4.5 billion years, but next time I see you, we should check in and find out whether it happened again. And or we talk about work. We talk about things, quite frankly, that even depress us.
Yeah.
So not only have we gone from 8 hours to 35 minutes, that 35 minutes is not that meaningful. So what I hope people, when they hear this, think when they hear that is, you know, you have an opportunity to do one of two things. In fact, both things, which is number one, you have the opportunity to take that 35 minutes and start turning it into something longer
Mm.
by scheduling human connection in your life and by inviting it into your life based on the kinds of questions you ask, which I'd love to get into at some point because the questions are the key. Um, that's the first thing. The second thing is that not only turn that 35 minutes into an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day, but also to deliberately ask the kinds of questions that allow you to um, make that time more meaningful. And it doesn't mean you don't talk about the weather. I talk about the weather, it's fine. Or you don't talk about, work and all these kinds of, trivial things. But
Mhm.
it just means that you're now the conscious observer of your life,
Right.
and you're now watching your conversations. And your awareness is allowing you to say, "Oh, I can see what I'm doing here. I am repeating the
Mm.
kinds of conversations that don't make me feel anything or that person feel anything. So I'm going to deliberately do things specifically, which I can share with your listeners and viewers, to make this turn into something more meaningful." That is the key.
There's just so much.
I know, I talked for a while there.
No, that was
I mentally told myself to shut up.
no, that was great. That was great, and I didn't wanna interrupt. There was so much, um, information, but really useful information. But one thing I do from more of a curiosity of my own is, what do you think the underlying mechanism is for human connection and, longevity?
Well, I feel like, one of the things that I wanna point out to your viewers and listeners is, you know, this is something you turn on or turn off, okay? Because a lot of people will hear me speak, and they think, "Oh, so you're telling me every time I interact with another human being, I have to have this deep kumbaya moment we're hugging each other and laughing with each other." No, because that would be like that would be like the equivalent to, like, a physical trainer, sports trainer saying to you that you have to work out 24 hours a day, and
Yeah,
they would never say that. They would say, "No, make sure you're getting enough exercise." So,
right.
you can turn the light switch on or off, so you don't have to, like I mean, one of the things that people laugh about with me is that they assume that after I've spoken at a conference that when I go and jump on the plane to go home that, like, I'm sitting there talking all of the entire time with the person sitting next to me. I'm like, "No, I usually put my headphones on. I wanna just chill out because all I've been doing is talking." So,
Yeah.
you turn it on or you turn it off. And the reason, again, I'm gonna remind, people who are hearing this, is you do it because you know it's good for you. So you have to first, step 1, recognize that you have the power through
Mhm.
human connection, by harnessing it, to have a positive influence on all the aspects of your life that are important to you, from your physical health to your mental health to your spiritual health to your professional health. Um the second thing is that, you have to realize that by doing that, you are 100%, increasing the length of your life. You are, very much influencing it. Like, I mean, researchers said that they can now better predict how long a person is going to live by
Mhm.
understanding the strength of their human relationships better than they can by knowing whether that person smokes cigarettes, what
Mm.
kind of food they eat, or how much exercise they do. I mean, a lot of people have probably heard this one, but it's worth saying for those who haven't heard it. But that great study that came out of Harvard that said that loneliness, and again, that's should be defined as lack of human connection,
Mm.
um, is the equivalent on a physiological level to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so these kinds of things are things that we have to recognize. We can't help but embrace and to see that it will impact our longevity. And back to important things that I know you speak about, like the nervous system or burnout. Um, Again, human connection is that thing that does cause us to calm down,
Right.
right? It does cause us to not be in a state of fight or flight, and it's that fight or flight that is causing us to feel burned out.
Totally.
In fact, there was this really great study that was done about, again, back to hunter gatherers, and um, so they looked at hunter gatherers, and they discovered that hunter gatherers, of course, had moments of fight or flight. And what would happen is that they would go out and they're hunting some bison or a bear or something that can hurt them, and they're in a group, but they would spread out. And if, let's say, while you're spread out during that period of time, you lose the pack, you lose
Mm.
your connection to the group, you would go into a state of fight or flight. And as you know, and I'll say this anyway, when you're in a state of fight or flight, your body needs extra blood to be moved to different parts of the body. So, extra blood to the eyes so that you can see what's lurking in the bushes, extra blood to the brain so you can make sharp decisions, and extra blood to the legs in case you have to run quickly. And again, it's hilarious to be speaking to somebody who's an expert on this subject. I'm only speaking to the people who are listening. Where do they get that blood from? Where does the body get that blood from? And as you know, it'll put digestion on hold and take the blood from that and put it to those areas that need it. Well, what would happen when you got reunited with the pack and you were okay? Well, you stopped being in fight or flight.
Right.
And well, that would only last for a short period of time. Well, fast forward 10,000 years later to present day, and we don't realize this, but we are continuously feeling disconnected from the pack. And because we feel disconnected from the pack, even though you feel normal, you're just riding the train to work, you feel normal, you think you're normal. On a biological level, and of course, as 10,000 years is just a blip in time when it comes to evolution,
Mhm.
your brain still thinks, "Oh, no, no, where's the pack? Where's the pack? Where's the pack? Where's my
Yeah.
people?" And we don't feel connected to our community, and so we're in this constant state of fight or flight. And then, of course, what we're doing is the body's like, well, we must need blood to go to the eyes, the brain, the legs.
Right.
Again, taking it from digestion. And you, being the expert you are in this field, know this better than anybody. But one of the biggest, if not the biggest health issues that people face are with their gut. Right. And with their, I believe it's the number one reason people go to emergency rooms is to something to deal with their stomach. The number one reason people call in sick for work is to something to do with their stomach. And so I will speak to companies and I'll say, is absenteeism a problem here? And they're like, yeah, it
Mm.
is. And if you're a big company like, Manulife and you've got hundreds of thousands of employees,
Right.
well, what does it mean when, 5% don't show up to work? I mean, that is lost productivity in the millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
And then you say to them, you realize because those people are in a state of fight or flight, they don't feel connected to the people they worked with. And for that reason, their gut is all messed up. And for that reason, they're having stomach issues. And that's why they don't come to work. So, um, again, back to this idea that uh, we can regulate our nervous system by being connected and no longer being
Mhm.
in that state of fight or flight, which then reduces burnout, which then also increases longevity. But the mechanism to answer that question, because um, a person might be listening to this and they might be thinking, okay, you got me. I've drank the Kool Aid. Human connection is important, but how the hell do I do it? Well, again, you have to have a target, right? So when it comes to physical fitness, everyone's got a target. I want my muscles to look like this. I want to be able to get to that weight. I want to run a marathon. Everyone's got these targets. Whereas the first thing I tell people is to create a target for yourself when you connect. And so the first target is, of course, to make people feel certain things. Well, how do you make them feel certain things? You do it by changing your questions.
Mm.
That is the key. Most people, and I say most, 99% of the world's population is asking predictable questions,
Right.
and as opposed to powerful questions. And it took me many years in my own life to realize the stark difference between predictable questions and powerful questions.
Okay.
And so the first step though is to have the courage
Mm.
to give yourself permission to ask those kinds of questions, because I'll give you a few examples of the kinds of questions I'm speaking about, and I guarantee you
Right.
the people who are watching or listening to this are going to go, "Are you kidding me? I can't ask those kinds of questions." And my my response is, "Yes, you can." And the reason I know that is because I do it every single day. So for example, for people who are listening to this and they have kids, the big mistake people will make with their kids is they'll say when they pick them up from school, "How was your day at school today?"
Right.
And a child never tells you how they felt at school. What they do is they'll tell you chronologically what happened. I scored a goal today. School was fine. It was good. And then it's done. And so that's a predictable question. And a child gets asked it almost every day.
Right.
What if you flipped it into questions like, what did you do today that made you feel most proud of yourself?
Oh.
Or was there a moment today where you had to help somebody at school? If so, what did you do?
Right.
What was your favorite question to answer in front of the class? Was there a moment today where you felt embarrassed? And if so, what were you embarrassed about? And how do you feel about it now? And immediately when you change the question, now you start getting how they feel about things.
Right.
And now you're connecting with your child in a meaningful way. Uh, if you're speaking to your partner and you say to them, "How was your day at work?" Well, that's a predictable question. And there's nothing wrong with that as
Mhm.
long as it just doesn't end there.
Right.
And so a person says, "Work was good. Work was fine. All right." That's usually their answers, right?
Yeah.
What if you were to follow up and say something along the lines of, "So if you could snap your fingers and just take one thing from your day and eliminate it, what would it be?" All of a sudden now the person comes, "Well, there was this one meeting I had, and this one person said this thing, and it really bothered me." And now we're connecting as human beings. Or you're speaking to a client one day and you're just asking them about how their summer was.
Mm.
And that's a fine question. It's a predictable question. "Hey Bob, how are you doing? How was your summer?" And Bob's coming back. "It was good. It was good." And a lot of people go, "Oh, well, that's great to hear. Yeah, that's good. It's hot summer though, huh? Wasn't it pretty hot out there?" Like they just don't go anywhere. Well,
Yeah.
somewhere in there, look for the opportunity to say to Bob,
Mhm.
"So Bob, I've never thought to ask you about this, but like, what did your summers used to look like when you were a child?"
Mm,
And now your client, Bob, goes, "Oh, well, I just don't think you know this, but I grew up in Moscow." You're like,
right.
"What?" And they start telling you their stories about growing up in Moscow. Like I was chatting with a bartender not too long ago, and I said, what do we ask the bartender? Oh, how long have you worked here? How do you like?
Mm,
Maybe how do you like working here? Right.
right.
So I ask those questions too, but then I go one step further and I'll say, so if you could have any job in the world, what would it be? And now that person tells me something that they care about, that
Right.
they really care about. And now we're having a meaningful connection. So you got to learn how to change the questions because when you change the questions, you change the answer. And when you change the answer, you change the relationship. And
Absolutely.
it's the thing that's available to anybody. And it's something we all need to do. And to the introverts who are hearing this, I am speaking to them as well. They may not need to be fueled as much by human connection, but for them to think that they don't need it is, well, just lunacy. It's something that we all need. So we all have the ability to change those questions. And now, to the people who are hearing me give those examples and thinking I could never just do that, the one thing I say to them is don't be afraid to preface why you're asking these questions so that the other person hearing you asking them doesn't feel as if they're being interrogated.
Right.
Or they like, what's your agenda? What are
Yeah.
you trying to, what kind of information are you trying to pull from me?
You're like taking notes
And
on the
what
side.
yeah, that's right. That's right. You're going to use this against me one day. You're going to be vulnerable. So what I often just say to people is just tell them why you're doing it.
Right.
Just say, hey, listen, you know what? I've decided that excuse me, I want to bring more human connection into my life, or you don't even have to use that word. That might feel like too lovey-dovey. You can just say, you know what, I find human beings fascinating. I'd love to know more about your life. You've been my client for 10 years, or we've been co-working with each other for five years, whatever it might be. You matter to me. And for
Mhm.
that reason, I'd love to just like get to know you. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about your life? And then the person now knows what your agenda is
Right.
and they're not making it up in their head. And
Yeah.
then you can say, look, so tell me what your summers used to look like when you were a kid. And as soon as you've opened the Pandora's box, like you can go anywhere. And there's very specific things you can do to get there. But that's the key, right? Is to all of a sudden now not just take your conversations for granted, but rather to treat your conversations in a way where you choose whether you're going to turn the light switch on. And if
Mhm.
you are, to change your questions to get there.
Absolutely. You're essentially a
Mhm.
therapist. That's what therapists do is they ask the right questions,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And
I mean,
they
it's funny the number of times I've heard people say, "I can't believe I'm telling you this."
Yes.
Right? Or I've never
Yeah,
told anybody this before. And but then it leans into um gosh, thanks for letting me share that.
absolutely.
Or I've always wanted to tell somebody that. And
Totally.
because no one's just ever given them an
The
opportunity to do it.
opportunity.
It's funny. Like at my corporate speeches, I asked the audience at the beginning of it's near the beginning of my keynote, I'll say, I want you guys just to raise your hand if your answer is yes to any one of these questions. And so here's a few of the questions I'll ask. I'll say things like, um, who in this room has at least one story from their life that when you share it with somebody else, it would make them say, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And of course, everyone has a story like that. So everyone's hand gets raised. Okay, who here has ever had a near death experience? Wouldn't believe it. Half the audience goes up. Who here has ever been in the room with somebody as they passed away and took their final breath? Again, one third of the audience raising their hand. Who here thinks that we can communicate with the other side after a person dies? Again, maybe 20% raises their hand. Who here's got some kids that are up to some cool things? Hands go up again. And so I say to the audience, I go, now everybody in this room raised their hand at least 3 times to those questions. I said, but at this event, the chances that you will speak about any of that stuff with anybody else in this room is pretty much zero.
Right.
And so I'm saying, it's like, and I said, it's not because the people in this room don't care. It's just that because no one in this room's ever been taught to ask the kinds of questions that
Yeah.
will allow you to share those kinds of things. And so, and that kind of brings in the hypha standard, right? That whole idea of designing it so
Yeah.
that you don't just hope it happens, so that it actually does happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say for myself, at least based on my own life experiences, I mean, my boyfriend calls me nosy, but I'm just curious. I'm the person that asks 1,000 questions and, oh, why do you do, why do you do it this way? Or like you said, how was your childhood? Oh, why were you raised that way? Why do you do it this way versus this way? So, and I think when that genuine curiosity comes out, people feel comfortable sharing. And so many
Yeah,
times people have said, I'm so glad that we had this conversation because I actually got something out of this conversation that I never actually thought about before or I never realized before. And I think in our society, it's more of an individualistic society where you're told to keep to yourself. Don't ask too many
right.
questions. Don't be nosy, all of these things that we've been
Mm,
told. So, and I think we've become so isolated to the point where, we're
yes.
struggling with loneliness, with you know,
Yeah,
58%. I still can't believe that number. That's a
yeah,
lot of
it's
people.
well, and, when you just talked about the idea that of you, jokingly being called nosy and, you're asking all these questions, something occurred to me not too long ago, and
Mhm,
I've been studying the subject for, like, feels like 20 years at least, and I can't believe this didn't occur to me, and that was the idea that when we choose to ask people deeper questions about themselves and give them an opportunity to, say what they wanna say and to feel what they wanna feel,
mhm.
we're not we're no longer in the game of creating conversation, we're in the game of being in service to other people.
Yeah.
And I'd never quite thought about that. And you start looking at, like, the great minds of our time and all these things that they accomplished in other categories of their life. And yet when you study them, the one thing that they often come back to is the importance of being in service.
Mm,
Like 3 great quotes, what is it? Mahatma Gandhi said that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in service to others.
right.
Martin Luther King said, life's most urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And Maya Angelou said that giving liberates the soul of the giver. And so when you hear these kinds of quotes, and there's 1,000 more from another 1,000 amazing people,
Yeah.
it keeps coming back to the same thing, right? Which is, when you wake up in the morning, again, do you consciously say to yourself, well, I'm going to interact with all my coworkers today and clients and customers and neighbors and the barista, and
Mhm.
I am going to deliberately choose to be in service to these people based on the questions that I choose to ask them.
Right.
And when you see it from that perspective, you realize, I used to think that I was an extrovert. And I only recently realized that I'm just extra interested in the way that other people feel
Right.
when I ask them those kinds of questions, because to watch them feel that
Mm,
is just, it just makes you feel so good.
totally.
And then I get to inadvertently be in service to myself by making myself feel good.
Yeah.
And I often use this example where I'll say to people, if you're ever in question of whether or not being in service to others is something that makes us feel good, just think about what it feels like when someone asks you for directions on the street
Right.
and you know the answer, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's amazing. But on the flip side of that, when you don't know the answer, maybe you're in a city that you don't travel to very often,
Mm,
it's a total bummer. You're like, oh, I don't live here. And you kind of feel bad that you didn't
totally.
have the answer. And then even worse is that when sometimes someone asks you for direction, you give them directions, and 5 minutes later, you realize you gave them the wrong directions.
Yeah.
Right? It's torture. And it's because we're hardwired to wanna be in service to people, and nothing brings greater meaning to
Yeah.
our lives. And so if, let's say, someone, drinks the Kool-Aid on that and says, "Yeah, okay, you're right, I get it, like, being in service to others is important." Well, then the obvious question comes into, like, well, then, what do you do what's the easiest way of doing it? And a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll think, well, I got to go volunteer at a soup kitchen,
Mm,
which is fantastic. That's great if you do that. Or I got to dedicate, time and money to a charity. Great. But those are like blips in our lives. And we all know that when you go dedicate time to a soup kitchen, you walk home and you're on cloud nine. You feel amazing.
yeah.
But that's only for that period of time.
Totally.
So what about all the in between times? And that is where, like, you can literally just make somebody feel seen. And it doesn't have to be long. Yesterday I bought a bagel in, New York, apparently there's a few places that sell them here, I was chatting with a guy and I just asked him, I said, "So what's your favorite cream cheese?" Because they have this humongous array of different cream cheeses.
Okay.
And and I the only reason I asked that was because I was in line and I noticed that like the first, 5 or 6 people ahead of me were like, "I'll get this, I'll get this, I'll get this." Okay, he's
Mm.
writing it all down. Next, "I'll get this, I'll get this, I'll get this." Okay. And I realized nobody was giving him any eye contact or talking to him. So I
Right.
said, "Hey, how you doing? How's your day going?" "Oh, it's good." And I said, "What's your favorite cream cheese out of curiosity?" And
Mm.
we just started talking about it. And he just said, "Well, I'm lactose intolerant," which of
Oh
course
gosh.
opened up a whole other door, right?
Yeah.
And, I'm like, "So what do" so it instantly became interesting, right? Just that moment of asking him a little bit about himself. Or I was in a taxi not too long ago in, Winnipeg, and the guy somewhere says something about, "Well, this is not my only job."
Mm.
And so I said, "Well, what's your other job?" And he says, "Oh, well, I'm a sailor. I work on,
Wow.
like, big ships. I'm a I do sailing navigation." So I said, "So, like the preliminary questions of where'd you learn how to do that?" And he started in India and he was in the Navy and bounced around and then started working for these great big ships. Well, within about 3 questions, I said, "So tell me what's the craziest thing you've ever seen when you've been out at sea?"
Mhm.
He then goes into this unbelievable story about how one time he was on a major oil tanker and they were passing by, I believe it was Nigeria,
Okay.
and pirates boarded the ship. And then he told me, like, in those situations, we have to go into the safe room and lock the door. Well, then the pirates started trying to shoot the door open with like machine guns, which they can't get through. And then for the next 3 hours, he told me that they siphoned off $25 million worth of oil into boats on the side. Like, this unbelievable story that would have never happened, again, if the question wasn't asked. So,
Right.
this guy is gonna do how many rides that day? And is he ever gonna retell that story? Of course not, right? So, to me, it's like, in that moment, he gets to feel seen and heard and talk about something that's interesting to him. He gets to tell a story he likes telling. So, he gets to feel all those emotions that he doesn't normally get to
Mhm.
feel. That's just and I'm not, like, sitting there in the back seat patting myself in the back going, "Oh, here I go. I'm gonna be in service to somebody." It's like, "Oh, aren't I such a good person?" Um, but you realize that, someone has to have the courage
Yes.
to go first in these situations,
Yes.
and that's the service you're providing. I talk about this in one of my keynotes where one time I came up to this big, huge water's edge in, Chiang Mai in Thailand, and I'd been hiking through the jungle that day, and this when we got to this water's edge, and this beautiful waterfall's coming into it, and, there's gotta be about at least 200 people all standing on the water's edge looking in, and it was hot as hell. It was like 37, 38 degrees that day, and everyone's just soaked with sweat,
Mm.
and, of course, we're all thinking the same thing, right? Like, wouldn't it be great to just jump into that water?
Yeah.
And I turned to my guide and I'm like, "Hey, listen, what do you think? Can I like swim in that?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Go for it." And I'm like, "Okay, like I'm gonna go to jail now, but let's just go for it." So I take my shirt off, my socks and shoes off, and I like screw it, like I just jump in.
Yeah.
And within about 5 minutes, um, there were about 30 to 40 people in the water.
Wow.
And it's because someone needed to jump in first
Totally.
to make it okay.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now everyone else then gets to do what they wanna do too. And to me, it's like an example of just being in service to others. I'll jump in first. I'll take the risk of maybe getting caught by the park rangers or whatever, but everyone else is jumping in and we're all feeling great. So it's the same is true when it comes to human connection. It's
Yeah.
like these are the questions that most people wanna answer,
Yeah.
and all we have to do is someone's gonna have to jump in the water first,
Mhm.
and you're only gonna get there by asking those questions. And yes, no doubt about it, like, you will have if you get committed to doing this, you're gonna have moments where, quite frankly, you'll ask the wrong person the wrong question at the wrong time. That's a that's a
I've
real
done it.
thing. Yeah, I've done it so many times, and you can tell by their body language, I joke
Yeah.
about this when I say, "Oh, at first they start kind of choking a little bit or they start foaming at the mouth." They're like face changes color.
Yeah.
And, but, I say that when that happens, you know what you do to get out of it? Just say, "Oh, man, this weather's been crazy lately, huh?"
Go back to the old script.
All right, well, here we go. We'll do what you need, and that's fine. I'd much rather have these awkward moments
Totally.
than not have those moments at all. So, I'm glad that you, are willing to do the same thing and being willing to be awkward yourself.
I think just coming with my background in counseling, and I think I've always had this curiosity of human stories and so many mental health issues in my own family. And I've gone through mental health issues. And I think I've always, I mean, not I think I know from a very young age, I've always had this fascination with the mind because my uncle has schizophrenia. And so obviously with people with schizophrenia, they see reality very differently. So I've always had this
Yes.
curiosity of what do you see that I don't see? And what have you
Right.
lived through that I've will probably never live through, like the pirate story you talked about. And
Right.
as you were talking, it reminded me of this word sonder. I don't know if you've come across this word.
Oh.
Have you heard of
Yeah,
it?
what's so funny? I've recently can you remind me of the definition? I recently came across it.
Maybe it's my Instagram stories. I don't know if you watch stories, but, I posted
Maybe,
it
yeah,
one
maybe.
day. So basically, it just means that everybody that is passing by you, whether that's, on the sidewalk or in the office, they all have vibrant stories like your own, but we
Right.
just don't know
Mhm.
it. And is that
Yeah.
moment we realize everyone has their own full on, full colored lives because when we see each other
Yes.
is we see little clips here and there without realizing.
Yeah.
It's like, when kids see their teachers not in a classroom, they're like, "Oh, you don't live
Right.
at school?"
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, that's true, and it freaks them out a little bit. They're like in fact, it just happened to my daughter this weekend,
yeah.
and, it's just like,
Yeah,
you're a human being, like, you
yeah.
have a
You have
real
a
life.
life. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
I always say that people are, the best television show of all time. All you have to do is ask the right kinds of questions, and you get to flip around from channel to channel. And not just even, like not just the stories, but, like, perspectives
Mhm.
on things.
Totally.
Um, and again, they're right next to us, and we don't see it. I was, heading into a dinner at a corporate event a couple of weeks ago, and, all the people are having a couple of cocktails in the cocktail reception before heading into the dinner room,
Mm.
and I started talking to about 4 young men. I would put them in their, God, I'm so old. I'm referring to young men like in their early 30s, and so chatting with these guys, and they all work together.
Okay.
And so I said to the one guy right out of the gate, I go, "So your last name? Are you Iranian?" And he's
Mm.
like, "I am Iranian." And I said, "Okay." And I said, Are you born in Canada?" And he says, "I am born in Canada." I said, "Okay. Do your parents have a crazy story from escaping from
Mhm.
Iran?" And he goes, "They do." And I go, "What happened?" He starts telling this story about how his cousin got shot and got hit in the face but didn't die,
Oh.
how they had to get smuggled in a truck across the border into some other place, and then from there, they were in a refugee camp, and then they went somewhere else. This amazing story. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, uh, the, other guys go, they turn to like, when he finishes it, the 2 coworkers, they look at each other, they go, "Did you know that about, let's call it Tom?"
Yeah,
Like, "No, I did not know about that." Again, Sonder, like, they're right next to us. They're right
absolutely.
there. How am I discovering this information about this guy I've only known him for 3 minutes? You've worked with him for 5 years.
Because
Like,
'Cause you're you,
what do you
Stuart.
talk about?
Because 'Cause you're
Well,
you.
I mean, I'm used to it, I'm used to it. I've had so many embarrassing moments, to be honest with you, or I call it awkward moments, where I'll be socializing with people who, it could be, let's say, a couple that's been married for 30 years,
Mm.
and, I'm just asking questions about their lives and talking to them, and the number of times where, like, the husband or the wife, they turn to each other, "I didn't know that about you," and you're like, "You grew up in Moscow?" You're like, What? How do
How
you
do
not know this, man? Like, what
exactly.
do you guys talk about?
Yeah.
And I've seen it so many times where parents will like, I didn't know that about their child, or a friend doesn't know
Mhm.
that about their friend. And you think to yourself, look, I mean, I get that, you're not a bad person. I believe that. But has it ever occurred to you, even just like, even if you don't get there by yourself, it just doesn't come naturally. Has it ever occurred? And there's a thing called Google, and you could say, give me
Yeah.
top 10 creative questions right now.
Yeah.
And immediately, people will start connecting in a meaningful way. You just got to do it. Well, and this comes back to the HIFA standard. I've
Absolutely.
I've been
Yeah.
trying something. Oh, I'm so excited about this because I've been trying something now for the last, I guess, 6 weeks, kind of testing something where,
Mm.
um, for me, what occurred to me was that, and it all came to me when I started looking at LEED, LEED,
Yeah.
and for buildings, and many people know that that is the standard that engineers have used for efficiency and energy and efficiency design.
Mhm.
Leadership, I think, in energy efficiency design. I think that's what it means. And basically, you get your rating system, and I've seen it in so many buildings, so have you. And I was looking at that not too long ago, and I was thinking to myself, that's really interesting. Like some group of engineers came together, environmentalists, whoever the group is, a bunch of smart people said,
Yeah.
you know what? We should create a standard. And I thought that was really smart. So at least people know what they're aiming for. And then I started thinking about just standards in general. I thought,
Mm.
well, the Michelin star standard for
Right.
restaurants. Then I started thinking about the ISO 9000, manufacturing standard for quality management in manufacturing. And there's so many different standards. And I thought, isn't it funny? Corporate
Mhm.
conferences, I've been speaking at them now for over 20 years. And uh, the number one reason people attend conferences, and this is not just me saying, it's not my
Mhm.
opinion, it's a reality. 80, what is it? 85% of people who attend conferences attend with the intention of connecting with the other people at the conference.
Right.
Conference event planners all say, it's so important for us to have
Mhm.
our people meet each other and to have meaningful conversations. And then what happens? The MC says things like, okay, guys, we're all going to be heading into a coffee break. Don't forget to introduce yourself to somebody out there.
Yeah.
And what does everyone do? Everyone stares at their phones. Everyone runs to the washroom.
Got
No one
it.
talks. And if they do talk, they're talking to people they know.
Totally.
And so I thought, I cannot believe that I've missed this, but we should be the ones who create the standard. We should create a standard by which conferences can design themselves around to
Mm.
ensure that those meaningful connections happen. Because event planners are really great at producing events that check the boxes of, okay, you got your keynote, you got your entertainment, you got your food planned, um, you've got your breakout sessions, your fireside chats, all that stuff, the panel discussions, you name it. And that content is important so that the attendees can take that information and become better at what they do. You plan all these things, but the number one reason people come is the one thing you don't plan.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so hilarious, so ironic. So this is where we created the HIFA standard. And so the reason I call it HIFA, which is HYPHA,
Okay.
is I've always been super fascinated by the mycelial network of mushrooms in
Mm.
forests. It is just so interesting, um, the way that there's this whole brain happening under the soil of
Mhm.
millions of fibers, and to the point where if a tree is sick in one part of the forest, it can send that signal out, and other trees that are healthier can send essentially healing medicine from their tree to that tree through the mycelial network.
Mhm.
So I was just studying that one day and looking at that and reading about it, and I came across that the tiny little fibers that actually are the conduit that the information travels through
Okay.
are called hypha.
Okay.
And I thought, oh, well, aren't we on planet Earth 8 billion little fibers? And
Oh.
we're all kind of, um, equipped to heal each other. We are equipped to translate information, to translate love, to transmit feeling and emotions.
Mm.
And yet, if we don't, just like within the mycelial network, um, if the hypha stops doing its job or if it becomes damaged, the ecosystem of the forest will break down. Well, we're seeing this in time on planet Earth that all the humans, which are like the representation of the Haifa, are not sharing information, sharing love, sharing emotions and feelings. And then we're seeing the ecosystem of planet Earth, the human ecosystem breaking down, and that's the reason why I think we have so much divide and so much division and so much anger and conflict. So we thought, all right, let's create a standard of check boxes that a
Mm,
conference can check in order to make sure that every time that people come together, they're not just leaving it to chance, but they're designing it with very specific tools that give people permission to talk to each other about meaningful things so that we can create a balance
mm,
at this event where one side of it is full on content, all about work, all about industry changes, all about AI, all that important stuff. And
mhm,
then the other side is, okay, we've been doing that for a while. Let's take a break. And I call these bonding breaks. Let's just take a bonding break and like just ask each other to share those crazy stories or to talk about
mm,
the things that you want to brag about or the stuff that matters to you the most. And oh my God, it's been absolutely incredible. And I did a pilot test, and the pilot test I did was with a really wonderful group of people in 5 stops across the country.
mm.
And but traditionally, this group, they're about, I would say the audience almost always was about 85% men
Okay.
over the age of 40
Mm,
and uber successful, but for the most part, more conservative than liberal.
okay.
And so, not the kinds of people who are going to have a lot of woo woo conversations with each other.
Right.
And so I thought, well, if it works here, it's going to work everywhere.
Yeah, totally.
And thankfully, thankfully it's not just worked, but the number of people who have come up to me and said, "Oh, I just talked about, like being in the room with my father as he passed away. I
Wow.
just talked about, going bankrupt with a stranger. I just talked about this one guy was saying to me, he talked about the complications of the birth of his fourth child and how his wife and child almost died during labor. And
Wow.
he just said, and then got emotional and started crying, like with the group that he was speaking to, and was just amazed at how empathetic they were to his story, and
Mhm.
that like how willing they were to like not think this was weird, but to rather embrace it. And so it was like this light bulb went off, and I realized events have been planned for like a gazillion years.
Yeah.
No one has been deliberately designing human connection at these events, and we now have a way to do it.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, we wanna take this to every event around the world because it's the thing people are starving for, and what better place to do it than in places people are already gathering.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah. Please take it
let's
to
let's get it out
retreats
there.
too, yeah, when you're talking
Yeah.
retreats, men's groups especially, because women already blab a lot about themselves, so
Yeah.
introduce to men's groups, because a lot of these men's groups, I find that it's just an echo chamber. They're not really getting
Yeah.
into the depths of things. So, there's so many different places you can introduce that into and just support, communication, connection in all sorts of ways.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
god, yeah. We you reminded me we created something also called the tribe building event, and I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. And, to your point where it's like people in different workplace environments, they may recognize, okay, there is importance to creating these types of connections, but they again don't know how to do it.
Mhm.
And so we created the tribe building event, which is we say enter as a team, leave as a tribe. And the idea is like I will come to your room. I will sit with you guys for a day, and I will get Susan from accounting
Yeah.
to talk about, her dream of becoming an astronaut. And Sharif from
Mhm.
operations will talk about, perhaps, I don't know, going through a traumatic experience in some
Yeah.
war-torn country. I don't know what it's gonna be, but what we'll do is we'll let people be real for a day and
Right.
to show you that this can happen. So you're right. It's a facilitation. It's like at a retreat or the men's groups or in a corporate environment or wherever it may be, just saying, okay, let's get out of our seats. Let's talk to each other. And immediately now, Susan, who's always, pissed off at Sharif, and Sharif's always pissed off at John, let's whatever it is, they
Yeah.
they sit down and they find out that they both like love the same sports team, or they find out that they both went through a difficult time in their childhood, or they find out that their parents both, got divorced when they were in high school. Like these kinds of things make me
Mhm.
go, "Oh, maybe Sharif's not such a bad guy.
Yeah.
Maybe John's okay or Susan's all right." So, you're right. You need people to be in these spaces to really facilitate the conversation, and, that is I don't know, that is a challenge, but, because you can only be at so many places at one time, but, to me, it's such an exciting notion to be able to sit in a room with people who don't talk about anything that's beyond just the corporate jargon,
Yeah.
and to have them by the end of the day realizing that, oh my gosh, turns out we're all human in here, no matter what color of skin we have or how old we are. It turns
Exactly.
out we're all human. Yeah, so that's what it comes
Exactly.
down to.
Yeah, I mean, just as you were talking, I'm thinking about, automatically I'm thinking about the nervous system is if I, let's say, when you're saying Susan and Charisse is if Cherie sees Susan as a threat, of course the nervous system's gonna be activated all the time, but then all of a
Yeah,
sudden he sees that Susan has a vulnerable past. That guard goes down, that nervous system now turns into parasympathetic instead of sympathetic. That rather than "I wanna fight you," now is, "Can we just hug it out? Because I feel your
right.
pain because I've had pain as well myself, and we've all experienced pain at some point in
Yeah.
life." So what are your plans for the future in terms of bringing this to the world? We need
It's
this
funny.
desperately.
You're right. Well, I guess for me, I said we should create a pie in the sky goal that even though we have no idea how we're going to pull it off, let's just put this crazy like goal against the wall. And that is how can we create 1 million meaningful human connections on planet Earth every day?
Mhm.
And that was just like, how do you even do that? And so that's the goal. And I still don't know exactly how to do that. But I will say, with respect to the HIFA standard, we're rolling it out with conferences first,
Right,
but without a doubt, we know that we will be bringing this to corporations and to say, you say that you want your people to connect, but what standard are you living by? So
right.
we've created a standard for them as well. That's already been done. But then we want to take it to schools. And so
Mm,
again, you say human connection is important in the school, but what standard are you operating by? So create a HIFA standard for schools.
totally.
So if we can get HIFA standards in as many places as possible where human connection again is designed and actually incorporated into the day to day at that corporation or within that government facility or at that school,
Mhm.
we actually, for the first time, started realizing maybe we could hit that 1 million people mark every single day. So that's the goal. We'll see where it goes. But fingers crossed that, hey, look, you know what? If we hit 10% of that, we'd be pretty damn happy.
No, it's reachable. I believe in it. And I believe in you. I
Thank
believe
you.
in your hypho standard because I honestly do believe there's so many people, especially nowadays, people are lonely. And I see that every single
Yeah.
day. And I see it everywhere. At my gym, for example, everybody's just headphones in, nobody's talking to each other, and I've
Yeah.
met people at my gym. People are saying, "I came actually here to connect with other people, but everybody has their headphones in, and I don't know if I should go up
Yeah.
and interrupt and, strike a conversation." And also there is the awkwardness of if it goes sideways, I gotta see this person again next time I come to the gym. So there are
Right.
all these
Yeah.
different scenarios and circumstances that are kinda around human connection. Whereas, if you introduce it in certain settings like the office or men's groups, retreats, now people have that guided practice in a very controlled setting,
Mhm.
and they can now go out to the world and be little seeds and spread that human connection around. So having that
Yes.
ripple effect in the world as well.
Yeah. You have to realize that this is something that takes practice.
Yeah.
Um, I get people coming up to me at the end of my keynotes, and I'll be just speaking to them casually, and then they'll go, "Oh, you're doing the thing. You just taught. You're doing it to me." And I'm like, "Well, you know what? Listen, yeah, I guess I am, but I can tell you that it's not like I'm trying to like, emulate. It's like riding a bike. You just do it everywhere you go.
Totally.
I often say like, and once you've done it a few times and you see how great it can be, you don't want to go back to the old way.
Mhm.
Um, you want to keep practicing. I often make a reference to like once you've flown business class, even though you still have to fly economy after that, you know how much you're missing
Yeah.
business class when you're back in
Exactly.
economy. It sucks.
Yes.
And so the same is true here, which is like once you've realized that you can jump into a taxi and you have 2 choices. You can
Mhm.
either have the scripted conversation that everybody has, or you can have the unscripted conversation. And once you've had the unscripted, you don't want the scripted anymore.
Yeah, definitely. So if people want to learn more about the HIFA standards, or if they want to, I guess, hire you to come and facilitate, where can they find you?
Mhm. The best place for people to go now is, the humanconnectiongroup.com. Um, I think we also have it as we have both thehumanconnectiongroup.com or
Perfect.
humanconnectiongroup.com. And that's where people can, see all kinds of resources that we have, whether it's wanting to do a team building event or wanting to do a keynote or wanting to take the course. We have an online course that teaches people how to build meaningful relationships. And of course, the HIFA standard is there for conferences that want to design it within their meeting. But also there, we've got a lot of free stuff that I encourage people to take advantage of. The biggest one being something called Toolbox 22, which is 22 resources to help you harness the power of human connection in both your professional life and your personal life. And it's all free. You can just get it. So it's all anyone who's
That's
watching or
awesome.
listening, go
Yeah.
get that for yourself. Just start incorporating it to your life. I literally could not have made it any easier for you with those free resources. Just take it. It's all
Yeah,
yours.
it's awesome. It's amazing. It's definitely worth checking out for sure. And then you're super active on LinkedIn as well. So
Yeah, that's kind of like where I'm showing up most often is I mean, I'm on Instagram, Stuart S. Knight, but on, Instagram or sorry, on LinkedIn, anyone who's listening or watching who wants to connect, yeah, find me on, Stuart Knight, on LinkedIn. I think that that's a really kind of neat space to show up these days and to have, more meaningful conversations and to put videos out, blogs out, so yeah, they can find me there too.
awesome, perfect. I do have one last question for you before
Mhm.
we end this. What are your 3 non-negotiables when it comes to your quality of life, happiness, um, just performance in general?
So obviously I'm gonna say number 1 is human
Yes.
connection. That would be really weird if like your listeners like, "Why didn't he say that?"
Can you imagine?
So human connection, yep, that's number 1. Number 2, I would say is making sure that I'm constantly looking at life through the lens of whether or not it's who I truly am
Mm,
or who I think I am. And of course, many people call that the ego. But a non negotiable for me is that I cannot walk through a day and have interactions with people or eat food or do anything without always being present to the idea that if something is causing me any type of pain or sadness or frustration,
mm,
to always come back to the home base, which is to say, that's not who you are.
right.
That's who you think you are. That's just the image of yourself that you're trying to protect. And that's when I wake up and realize, oh, yeah, right. I'm just a soul walking
Yeah.
around in this big meat suit. And that's the second thing of just always being rooted to my true
Mhm.
spiritual self. And then the third non-negotiable for me is I would have to say nature.
Yeah.
It's a real non-negotiable for me. I recognize if too much time has gone by and that I've not been in nature or connected with nature. And I can do it in the city to the best of my ability. And sometimes that's just kind of finding a quiet place surrounded by trees in New York where I have a coffee in the morning.
Right.
Um, or just deliberately pausing and listening to the birds. There's a ton that I didn't even really quite knew existed in the city. To the point where if let's say too many weekends have passed, I'm like, all right, it's Thursday. Tomorrow we're going somewhere. Honey,
Right.
pick a place and let's go to the to the mountains or let's go to a forest. Let's get an Airbnb. Let's let the
Mhm.
kids sit in the river and like play with rocks and look for fish and stuff like that. So though
Mhm.
that's the third one. I find that's a non-negotiable for sure.
The 3 best ones, the 3 I'm completely aligned with your all 3 of yours, so thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Nature's
My pleasure. And
yeah, thank you, sorry.
I'm interrupting you. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me on this show. This has been so nice. Like you, I know you personally as someone who I know genuinely cares about the world and genuinely wants to see people level up with their physical health, their mental health, their spiritual health. And so I know you work your ass off doing it.
Mhm.
And sometimes it comes with rewards, sometimes it doesn't. And but you don't stop showing up. So thank you for having me on your show and thank you for continuously showing up.
I appreciate those kind words, especially coming from you. Honestly, it means so much. You have no idea. Thank you so much
Oh,
for your time, for sharing everything. I'm gonna get everybody to. I have a lot of people that I want them to start using the HIFA standard because people need to
awesome.
start talking. Start
Yeah. You
opening
think?
up because they hold on to so much, and I do
Yeah.
honestly believe once people start releasing their stories and sharing those stories, that energy, the tension they hold will start to release as well. Because sharing's caring,
Yes.
and we gotta share that energy and release that trauma and everything we've been holding in. So thank you so much for
100%.
HIFO standards, for everything you do, for taking your time to chat. I appreciate you so much, Stuart. Thank you so much for being here.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who has been carrying more than they should alone. And if you're ready to move beyond insight and recalibrate the system beneath your leadership, you can start inside the 14-day Inner OS Reset or explore deeper work at deannawrose.com. Until next time, protect your state, respect your energy, and remember, your leadership is only as scalable as the nervous system running it.